Many people are convinced that there's overwhelming scientific evidence for human evolution. But the irony is some of the latest advances in understanding the origin of humanity are actually providing incredibly provocative evidence that suggests the biblical account of human origins may actually be correct. Now, this work is in a new area of anthropology known as molecular anthropology, where scientists are comparing the genetic variability of people around the world from different people groups, and this genetic variability tells them information about the origin of humanity. For example, by looking at DNA sequences, the similarities and the differences of DNA sequences, again, taken from people around the world, we can construct the history of human beings from the very beginning. We can get information about when human beings originate, the location of humanity's origin. We get information about the population size of the first humans and the pattern for humanity's spread around the world. When scientists compare the genetic variability of people around the world, what they conclude is that humanity must have originated relatively recently, on the order of about 100,000 years ago. That is, humanity originated thousands of years ago, not a couple of million years ago, as the traditional evolutionary models state. That humanity originates in a single location, East Africa, which is very close to where theologians think the Garden of Eden would have been. That humanity originates from a very small population of individuals, and interestingly enough, by looking at mitochondrial DNA, which is small pieces of DNA found in the organelle known as a mitochondria, which has an inheritance that goes from mother to daughter and traces the maternal lineage of humanity, it looks as if humanity originates from a single individual that scientists call mitochondrial Eve. And when we look at the Y chromosomal data, which traces the paternal lineage of humanity, it's a piece of DNA that is inherited father to son, we see the same type of result. It looks as if humanity originates from a single male individual that's referred to as Y chromosomal Adam by the scientific community. That is, it looks as if humanity originates recently in a single location, close again to where we think the Garden of Eden would have been, from a very small population, traceable back to a single man and a single woman. And when we look at the migration patterns of humanity, it's very similar to what we see in the biblical text, where humanity's migration begins at or near the Middle East and fans outward. In other words, the genetic data seems to support a biblical understanding of human origins. That is, humanity originates from a primordial pair, which is consistent with the biblical text and is fundamentally at odds with the evolutionary paradigm. Now, when I present this type of information, people typically have two questions. One has to do with the timing of humanity's creation, because doesn't the Bible teach that humanity was created, let's say, somewhere around 6,000 years ago? Well, the way in which people arrive at that understanding is based on the genealogies in Genesis 5 and 11. The genealogies in Genesis 5 go from Adam to Noah, and in Genesis 11 go from Noah to Abraham. The genealogies each consist of 10 patriarchs, and it talks about a particular patriarch giving birth to a son, and that son living to be so many years old, and then giving birth to another son, and people will take the ages of the different patriarchs and do a little bit of math and back calculate the time when Adam must have existed, which is about 6,000 years ago, if again you look at the genealogies in that way. But it turns out that theologians have argued that these genealogies are not meant to be timekeeping devices. They rather are theological constructs that are meant to communicate key members of a lineage that goes from Adam to Noah and from Noah to Abraham. That there are gaps in the genealogies, that there are names that have been omitted. And there's also ambiguity in the original Hebrew, where the term son can refer to descendant, and the word that's translated as begot can mean to give rise to a lineage that would include certain individuals. So in other words, the genealogies really can't be used to calculate when Adam lived. And there's no reason why a scientific date of about 100,000 years ago for the origin of humanity would necessarily conflict with the genealogies in Genesis 5 and 11 or the biblical text. Another thing to keep in mind is that the scientific methods that are used to estimate the time when humanity originates at about 100,000 years ago are methods that give crude approximations for the date of humanity's origin, and so those dates are to be taken with a grain of salt as well. So the uncertainty in the scientific data and the uncertainty in the biblical data means that there is harmony between these two accounts when it comes to the time in which humanity originates. Now, what about a location of humanity's origin in East Africa? Shouldn't humanity be described as originating in the Middle East, in Mesopotamia specifically? Well, again, when we look at the location of Mesopotamia and we look at at East Africa, these are areas that are rather close to each other on maps. And so the origin of humanity scientifically and biblically are very close to each other. But again, just as with the date for humanity's origin, there is biblical uncertainty and there's scientific uncertainty. Scientifically, what has to be done when you estimate where humanity originates from is to assume that the location of people today who provide DNA samples for these genetic comparisons is where they have always been. And it very well may be that humans have migrated from the time of their inception, and that migration may actually confound trying to pinpoint scientifically the location of humanity's origin. Likewise, from the biblical text, it's not really clear exactly where the Garden of Eden would have been. Today, some theologians are actually arguing that it would have been at the bottom of the Persian Gulf. If that's the case, an origin of humanity in East Africa is very close to, again, where the biblical text would say humanity originates. So the whole point here is this, that when Genesis 3:20 says Adam named his wife Eve, she would become the mother of every living person, that statement is scientifically demonstrated as being a true statement based on the discovery of mitochondrial Eve as being the mother of all human beings. And so when it comes to the scientific case for the biblical account of human origins, it is more robust today than it has ever been in human history. We can make a much stronger scientific case today for the validity of the human origins account in Scripture than we could ever make. And this, to me, is incredibly gratifying as someone who is a scientist and who is also a Christian.